Liberal Viewer presents.
So, the suicide of internet prodigy and information freedom warrior Aaron Swartz last week, in the midst of his fairly bogus federal prosecution for computer fraud, raised a lot of issues for cable news channels to investigate, especially about prosecutorial misconduct, but most of that coverage was fairly superficial when it existed at all, with Fox News broadcasting no stories on Aaron Swartz at all that I saw, while the CNN story I saw was pretty shallow in its reporting of the criminal justice issues, though CNN did at least explain the prosecution of Aaron Swartz resulted from his fight for free information in this clip.
The case stemming from Swartz's passionate belief for a wide-open free internet. It dates back to July 2011, when he was indicted on charges of stealing millions of academic articles and journals from a digital archive at MIT. The charges could have landed him in prison for up to 35 years, along with $1 million fine.
I think that they tried to turn a molehill into a mountain. They, in the kind of old-time language, they really tried to make a federal case out of it.
Now, that clip was good as far as it went, but CNN never delved into the lack of real criminality behind the mountain the government made out of a molehill, and CNN even slipped into the trap of being too balanced by presenting both Aaron Swartz's family side and the prosecutor's side without really giving viewers the information necessary to decide between them in this clip.
Swartz's family released this pointed statement. Aaron's death is not simply a personal tragedy. It is the product of a criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach. Decisions made by officials in the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's Office and at MIT contributed to his death. MIT's president says the school is launching an investigation to examine its role in the prosecution. When the Boston-based U.S. attorney first announced the indictment, the press release said, quote, "Stealing is stealing, whether you use a computer command or crowbar, and whether you take documents, data, or dollars."
Now, giving both the family side and the prosecutor's side without going deeper doesn't allow CNN's viewers to really understand the injustice of this case, never mind addressing a criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach that Swartz's family talked about, while over at MSNBC, anchor Chris Hayes, a personal friend of Swartz, did a lot better job, at least a better job of explaining the lack of real criminality behind the prosecution, as you can see on last Sunday's Up with Chris Hayes in this clip.
At the time of his death, Aaron was being prosecuted by the federal government and threatened with up to 35 years in prison and $1 million in fines for the crime of, and I am not exaggerating here, downloading too many free articles from the online database of scholarly work, JSTOR. Aaron had allegedly used a simple computer script to use MIT's network to massively download academic articles from the database that he himself had legitimate access to, almost 5 million in all, with the intent, prosecutors allege, of making them freely available, although he never did. You should know that despite JSTOR declining to press charges or pursue prosecution, federal prosecutors dropped a staggering 13-count felony indictment on Aaron for his alleged actions.
That's a much better explanation of the bogus nature of the charges against Aaron Swartz, which are based on a pretty shaky legal theory that violating a website's terms of service can be turned into a federal crime, and Chris Hayes delved even deeper into the injustice of the case against Aaron Swartz, even suggesting possible solutions in this clip.
In a statement about his death, Aaron's family and partner wrote, "Aaron's death is not simply a personal tragedy. It is the product of a criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach. Decisions made by officials in the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's Office and at MIT contributed to his death." You should know his death is a good reason to revisit the 1986 Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the law under which he was prosecuted, since it is far too broad. And it's also a good time to take a hard look at Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz, whose office prosecuted Aaron with such recklessly disproportionate vigor and who is reportedly considering a run for governor.
So MSNBC's Chris Hayes definitely did a better job than the CNN story of explaining the injustice of the prosecution of Aaron Swartz, and even went so far as to offer the same two solutions for which Aaron Swartz's group Demand Progress are asking people to sign a petition, namely passing Aaron's law to amend the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and investigating those who prosecuted Aaron Swartz. But to get even deeper to the real root of the problem, I had to go to the non-corporate alternative media, where I found an interview with Aaron Swartz's partner, Taryn Steinbrickner-Kaufman, who provided the additional details about Aaron Swartz's view of his prosecutors that you can see here.
He hoped that the prosecutor's office would realize that they didn't, he had done nothing illegal. I mean, as he put it as press release, in his the very few press releases and work that he did around this, he likened it to charging somebody for borrowing too many books from the library, which, all of the articles he had the right to access individually. The only confusion here was that he had just accessed a lot of them. And he hoped the prosecutors would see the injustice and the unfairness of what they were doing, but they weren't interested in that. They weren't. Steve Hyman and Carmen Ortiz's office were interested in winning. They were interested in a notch on their belt. They were interested in taking a scalp, but they weren't interested in justice. They weren't interested in, does it actually make sense for this young man to be labeled a felon for the rest of his life?
And that's a key problem at the root of this injustice. Prosecutors more interested in winning and career advancement than their ethical duty to pursue justice, and that's not a problem limited to this case, which was why it was so important Aaron Swartz's family referred to a criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach, because after all, Aaron Swartz was a fairly privileged white guy, and there are many underprivileged non-white people victimized by this system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach every day, which is why I was glad to see Aaron Swartz's partner in that Democracy Now! Interview also said this.
The third issue is the broader problems in our criminal justice system. Why does someone like Steve Hyman have the power to do this, unbridled power? Why would you charge somebody with up to 35 years in prison if you actually think that all they deserve is 6 months, as the plea deal suggested? That, and this happens to people every day in our system, and most of them have many fewer resources than Aaron. And much less support, and don't have the option necessarily even of considering hiring a lawyer and going to trial over the course of 2 years, and are forced to take the plea deals when they're not guilty or when the plea deals are completely unjust. And I think that we need broad criminal justice reform in this country. We incarcerate more people per capita than any other country in the world, and we don't see lower crime rates because of it. There's justice, and then there's justice, and right now our system does not promote justice. Our system is punitive, our system is Kafkaesque, our system is unfair, and Aaron and millions of other people suffer because of it.
That's such an important point, and I wish I'd seen someone make it on one of the cable news shows. As someone who was a public defender representing poor people charged with crimes for about 5 years in 2 different states, I can testify to the truth about the criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach, because I actually saw many prosecutors more interested in winning and career advancement than their ethical duty to pursue justice, and I also experienced the criminal justice system's need for basic structural reforms, like the ones I discussed in my video, 13 Years in Prison for a $146 Forgery is Justice. These basic problems with the criminal justice system should have been the most important issue raised by Aaron Swartz's suicide, and the issue most discussed, not relegated to non-corporate alternative media, I think, but I want to know what you think. Should journalists, even cable news journalists, have spent more time reporting on the criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach exposed by Aaron Swartz's suicide? And regarding the lack of any coverage broadcast on Fox News, does the lack of coverage of Aaron Swartz's suicide on Fox News documented in this video qualify the video to be an item on my Fox News Bias playlist?
YouTube, you decide.